Morning everybody, my name is Marius. Today I'm going to do a presentation for you guys, and I've chosen dysfunctional family roles and their characteristics. The reason why I chose this is I think families are affected. Many addicts and alcoholics that come into a facility don't really know the effect that we've had on other people. In fact, many addicts and alcoholics will come in and they think everything's still hunky-dory, but everybody is affected by us using drugs and alcohol, and that's just the truth. So what we're going to do today, we're going to have a look at how it affected our families. We're also going to have a look at how our family coped with it, because everybody does it in a different way, isn't it? Okay. So the question I ask is, who grew up in a house where there was drugs or alcohol present? Okay. So you guys will be able to relate to this maybe, but there's other dysfunctions as well. Who grew up in a house where there was a lot of anger? In fact, so much so that it affected the people, the whole family. So the same year as well. Because when we talk about a dysfunctional family, it doesn't only have to be drugs and alcohol. It could be any dysfunction in that. A mental illness, for instance. Let's take depression. Whether the mental illness was diagnosed or not, it also becomes a dysfunction. Somebody with bipolar, somebody that doesn't take their meds with bipolar. You know, it's up and down, and the rest of the family doesn't know how to handle the situation. And that's what we're going to have a look at today. We're going to have a look at how it affects the family. Okay, so when we talk about families, we talk about a nuclear family, which is a very close family, extended family, that's your opa and oma and so on. Even your neighbors are affected. Who stays in a complex? Did you guys make trouble? You know, scream and shout, and everybody comes out of their house. Hey, get the popcorn, get the popcorn. Sit there, Nicholas. Jackie's on. Your friend group, am I right, guys? It affects your friend group. Some friends didn't want to go out with me anymore. When I do this slideshow, I'm going to refer a lot to myself, because this slideshow is almost, guys, it's as if it was written for me. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. And the way we were affected, I grew up in a house where my stepfather abused alcohol. He was an abusive and aggressive drunk. So you'll see that I said he's a drunk, because nobody can say who's an addict or an alcoholic. Okay, it's a self-admitted disease, guys. So I can't say whether my stepfather was an addict or an alcoholic. What I can tell you is that he abused alcohol, and he became abusive and aggressive. He was one of those people that it didn't matter what time he got home, we had to jump out, open the gate for him. If we don't, there's even worse problems. When we opened the gate, he would come in and he would kick the dog and start verbally abusing us and my mother, until we grew up and my middle brother started, he actually started fighting him, so it was violence and all this abuse, and that's how I grew up. And even growing up like that, I still drank. It doesn't make me a bad person. I just thought I was going to be different. What I didn't realize when I drank was that I had the disease of addiction. That's the only thing that makes me different from other people. So it affects our friend groups. As I said, I became even worse than him. I became more abusive and aggressive than what he ever was. I used to go out to pubs and there was always a fight. My friends stopped going out with me. They didn't want to. My work friends weren't really happy with me if I arrived with a hangover, if I arrived late. So you can see that it affects many areas in our life if we use drugs and alcohol. Other types of dysfunctional families, and I wanted to mention that because we did say a little bit earlier, remember, it's not only drugs and alcohol. We have the anger, chaos, just a chaotic family. Everything's always chaos in the family. Or we get a conflict-driven family. Do you know there's some families that they thrive on conflict? Everything becomes a conflict. The smallest little thing becomes a conflict. Abusive. If it's an abusive family, a pathological family, an emotionally emotionally neglected family, where emotions are not allowed to be mentioned. And that's the way we grow up. You can't grow up like that because it affects everybody in the house. Everybody walks around not really knowing, what am I allowed to say? Am I allowed to say how I feel? Am I allowed to mention that I'm sad today? And then an overprotective family as well becomes a dysfunction.
So it could also be a
Sorry, just...
It can also be your first marriage if it's abusive.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of people that leaves an abusive relationship goes into another abusive relationship and into another. But absolutely, so it could. And it changes everybody, doesn't it? It changes the way we act. It changes the way that we talk and walk and absolutely everything. So the different kinds of families, I did mention it a little bit. It's families living together but are not married. So these days you don't have to have a family, you can live as partners, isn't it? Okay. It's a nuclear family which we've spoken out. It's a blended family formed from another relationship. In other words, a step family like I was in. It's the same-sex family where they adopt or even have a child. Extended family, as I said, lone parent, adopted, and a beanpole family, which is, maybe just with one child. But if we talk about family members, and just to keep it short and sweet, family members are spouses or partners, parents, children, siblings, extended family member, and committed friends. Who here has an only child? Nobody. So
I'm not sure if my one would qualify as being the only child. Between me and my dad, I'm the only one. But my mom had 3 other children from 2 previous marriages.
Okay.
And then my dad had 2 children from his previous marriage.
Okay. Were you spoiled?
I don't know. I don't know if this will answer your question. My dad was 52 and my mom was 51 when I was born. So I literally, around 15, 16, my mom was already a pensioner. My dad had already left us.
Okay, we have to move on. So I'm just going to ask, were you spoiled? Do you feel you were spoiled?
I think I had a...
Who lived in your family? Did you live alone or did you live with everybody else?
My dad and my mom.
So you were like an only child, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I'm talking about this, because this is not really for this, but for me, and I'm just going to mention that there has to be a hierarchy in a family. Okay. If that makes sense what I'm saying. So in a family, if I say there must be a hierarchy, there must be parents or parent, it doesn't matter, and then the children. Okay. Once you allow that hierarchy to break, what happens is that the family become enmeshed. Now what happens is that all decisions are made by everybody, and it shouldn't be like that, because they are still children. And I did that thing. I had an only son. So we would say to him, okay, you know what, we're going to do that on Saturday. And he would be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then it'll be like, and then the one day I bought myself a new car, and he was like, well, where's my new car? I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And I realized what happened was that I included him, and he became an adult. And he thought he's part of all decisions. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, we're going to Durban. I don't want to go to Durban. Oh, now what? Because I allowed that. That's why there has to be a hierarchy in a family, okay? And I want you guys to remember and to think about what I'm saying. If you didn't grow up in a hierarchy, I honestly believe that your thinking is wrong, and you become entitled. Entitled to something that maybe you're not ready for yet. And that's the problem, I think. Right. So if we talk about family members and also extended family members and those committed friends, you know what the committed friends are? It's that guy that just walks into your house and goes to your fridge and opens up the fridge. And he starts taking out stuff, or sits there on the couch when you get home and he's watching TV, or, and it's, hey man, you're like family, stay for dinner, man. Okay. There's common features of families, guys. Every family has unique roles. These unique roles are, maybe you're good at fixing computers. So you become the person, the whole family will go to you and say, oh man, something's wrong with my computer. Can't you fix it, please? Can you see that unique role that everybody takes on? I'm sure you guys can maybe relate to one of these, whether it's the practical one, the financial one, creative, the listener, the organizer, the tech savvy, the peacemaker. There's a peacemaker. We all have unique roles in the family, and we don't even know that sometimes. And it just happens as well. It's not that I wake up one morning and walk into the lounge and where everybody is sitting, and from now on, I'm fixing all the computers, okay? It just happens that everybody says, yes, Marius is good with computers, so if something goes wrong or I need my phones, please, Marius, help me with this. These are the unique roles. And then there's shared roles. In most families, this is what I was speaking about, the hierarchy. In most families, parents are expected to be the leaders or the executives of the family, if we can call that, and children are expected to follow the leadership of their parents. Parents will generally provide food, clothing, and shelter for the family, and they manage the home. Am I correct, guys, if I say that? Eh? And everybody is responsible for household duties. It should be like that. This is in a perfect family, obviously. The problem with this shared roles is that we also sort of grow up like that. So if this is not okay, this is how we're going to live our life going forward. And then there's rules, guys. There's spoken rules. Allowances is a spoken rule, isn't it? Curfews, chores. You will be home in a school night. You'll be in bed by 10 o'clock. Your homework must be done at night. Listen here, guys, we eat dinner at 6:15. Everybody must be at the dinner table. These are spoken rules, okay? If you stay out past your curfew, you know there's a consequence because it's spoken rules. Guys, rules is necessary in life. Because if there isn't rules in life, it would be chaos. That's why we have rules here. And that's why everybody has to follow the rules. Because if we allow one person not to follow the rules, it's going to be like, but he or she doesn't do it, why must I do it? That's why rules are important, even in a family dynamic. And then you get the unspoken rules, and this is how your emotions are expressed, how you speak to each other, how you show love, and what constitutes appropriate or inappropriate touch, how conflict is handled, and other examples. I'm sure, I don't know if anybody grew up in the house and you say something to your mom or dad and they're like, you don't speak to me like that. You know, because it's an unspoken rule that's how you must grow up, okay? So everybody's different, but unspoken rules is something that as a child you grow up and you see what your brother gets hit for and you make sure you don't do the same thing. Except obviously for Mishak, that was the only child. With the unspoken rule, the problem with the unspoken rule is you learn these unspoken rules by observing how others do it. But if your parents gave you lots of gifts as love, you're going to do that when you go older. So a lot of people is like, you know what, my dad wasn't always there, but sure, you know what, he used to buy me a lot of things. And that becomes my belief, doesn't it? Because we also grow up with values and beliefs in a family. And those values and beliefs are spiritual or religious affiliation, priority, honesty, hard work, hopefully, guys, and in a shared history. Yes, you know, my grandfather was a Springbok boxer, eh? You know, when we in a family gathering. Ja, onthou jy vir Oupa Ben, eh? Yes, ja, Oupa Ben. He used to be a rover oak, you know, so you talk about the shared history, you enjoy it, isn't it? You enjoy being part of this family because it's got a history, man, and you love talking about it. Guys, if everything I just said now, if all that works, then families are a system, eh? Am I correct, eh? A system works, doesn't it, eh? But a system will only work until something changes. And as soon as something changes, guys, then the system breaks. And when the system breaks, everything changes. All of a sudden, roles are shifted. Because the person with that unique role can't do it anymore, so other people will now start filling in for that role. Responsibilities changes. Rules are broken. Simple example. When I arrived home at midnight or after 12 o'clock, how could I say to my son, but it's a school night, you must be in bed at 10 o'clock? He would be like, but you don't do it, man. And Not even my wife could then say to him, listen here, you need to go and sleep, because he'll be like, but Dad doesn't do it. So once there's a shift in a family, once somebody breaks the rules, then everything changes. The whole family is different now. Eh? We upend our values and beliefs. I used to go to church every Sunday morning, whether I wanted to or not. But I went because we were like a family, and we went there. And then I stopped going because I'd be lying in bed with a hangover. How can I expect my son to go to church? He'll be like, but Dad doesn't do that. And is it really okay to have values and beliefs where one person arrives home drunk after midnight or not at all? And that's why everything starts changing in the family, and there's a loss of history. Who now wants to be part of a family where there's a bit of chaos? Who wants to be part of a family where things are completely different now? Everything has changed. Guys, a change in one aspect of a family starts becoming a ripple effect, and it changes many aspects of the family. Things start changing from positive to negative, from minor to extreme. Small things are made big now. So it's not anymore, don't worry, we'll sort that out. Now it's like, what's going to happen next? Everything starts becoming uncomfortable. And the problems caused can either have a direct or indirect impact on a family member in any areas. Anybody that's grown up in a family like I asked you guys, you grew up in, will know there are 3 unspoken rules of a dysfunctional family. And the first one is, don't talk. So, you know, on a Monday I would go to school, and all the guys would be talking about how lekker their weekend was. I couldn't say to them, you know, let me tell you about my weekend. Eh? You know, my stepdad arrived home at about, it must have been 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday. We opened the gate for him. He came in, kicked the dog, started verbally abusing us. There was a lot of screaming and shouting. My mom phoned the cops. So you just don't talk, eh? Just keep everything quiet. Because the next one as well is, don't trust. So I couldn't even go to the teacher and say to the teacher, listen, you know what, there's something big wrong with my family. Because I can't trust that the teacher would keep it to themselves. Maybe the teacher goes to the headmaster and I get taken away. So already I'm now in a family where I can't talk about what's happening and I can't trust. And the third unspoken rule is I'm not allowed to feel. I'm not allowed to say, while we're sitting at a dinner table or even just watching TV, I'm not allowed to say, you know what, I really feel depressed today. Or I really feel angry, or I'm hurt. Because the big problem in the room is not addressed. And if the big problem in the room is not addressed, then it's just going to carry on the way it is. Can anybody relate growing up like that? Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. Eh? So a dysfunction in a family will change how it feels to live in the family. It'll change how people communicate. As I said earlier, I grew up in the house where I'm the youngest boy. Myself and my 2 brothers hardly spoke. We just like, hello, how's it? Yeah. There was really nothing. We wouldn't sit and joke like I think other siblings did. I don't know if they did, I'm sure. But it was just like, how's it? Yeah, okay, yeah. Not, hey, how's the rugby going? How's the school going? If we see each other at school, it would just be like, walk past each other. Because there's a bigger problem. And even though I didn't realize it, but that bigger problem was in my head. It also, how family members relate to each other and get along the same. It's exactly the example I just used. How family members deal with problems and conflicts. So, my middle brother, as I said, as he got older, he fought my stepfather. How he dealt with this problem and conflict, I still believe today, is that he used to become our protector. But without me not even knowing, like, he would hear that there was another guy, an older guy, that had bullied me, And then he wouldn't say anything, and then the next thing I'm like, hey, there's a fight. And I go out, and here's my brother fighting that guy. And he wouldn't say a word. He wouldn't say, yeah, I fought him because he did that. He would say, no, I fought him because he said something to me at the rugby or whatever. But it became once too much for me to be able to look past the fact that that's how he dealt with the problems and the conflicts. It's also our family members meet each other's needs. There was no ways when I was drinking that I could meet my family's needs. All I could do was still make money. Because the industry I was in, we made a lot of money. So I could just carry on doing that. And we drank a lot. Our members assume roles and meet demands of these roles. My wife stopped asking me to go and fetch my son at school, because I'd either be late or I'd arrive there intoxicated. So there's no ways I could meet any roles. My wife it's my ex-wife, she eventually took over all the finances. She ran everything because I just couldn't meet my roles or my responsibilities for that matter. And it also how the family members relate to the outside world. And we often recreate our family relationship in other relationships. I remember when I was at school and I used to go visit somebody. I would go visit one of my friends and I'd be like, yes, it's so nice here. Eh? Yes, this is such a happy family. And I would ask them, is it okay if I sleep over tonight? Just so that I want to be part of this nice family. Eh? And then I'd phone my mom, is it okay if I sleep over? And she's like, yeah, okay. Yeah? Because I didn't want to be home, man. Why am I, what must I do at home? Unfortunately, as I said, I recreated that for my own son, where I became that person after saying I won't. So there's certain characteristics that happens. When the illness or dysfunction stays around for a long time, there's certain negative characteristics that start affecting the whole family. And the first one's guilt. And whether some of you are sitting here and thinking, no, that never happened to you, it's just a fact. That somebody in your family is feeling guilty that you are using drugs and alcohol. Somebody in your family thinks they did something wrong for you to use drugs and alcohol. And that's the worst of all. We leave our families with guilt. They blame themselves. They believe they must be doing something wrong, which triggers the person's dysfunction. They begin to question themselves and find unreasonable fault in their own behavior. And my son might say, hey, maybe it's because I didn't play well last week that my dad's not coming to watch rugby this week. That's not the reason. It's because I only got home at 4 o'clock in the morning. But this is what we do to our family. Eh? We put guilt on them. When I see families, there's two things I always tell them. And the first thing I say to them is, you know what? It's not your fault, number one. And number two, you can't fix it. Only you can fix you, guys. And the more you blame, guess what happens? The more you take away that power to fix anything. There's only one way we fix something in life. And that's if we start taking responsibility. I don't care how small the responsibility is that you think you have to take. But unless you can take responsibility, nothing's going to change. Because you're always going to blame somebody else or think it's somebody else's fault. Nobody tied you to a chair and forced pills down your throat and hold your nose closed so that you have to swallow them. Nobody turned the chair upside down and put white powder in your nose. You did that to yourself. You need to take responsibility for that. If I can't take responsibility, even for where I come from, I will never be able to move forward in life. And that's what our step one is about. You need to understand what step one is about. Step one is not about admitting I'm an addict or an alcoholic. Go read step one again and read the questions there. Insecurity starts happening in the family. Things are never steady for any period. Shaky finances, lack of job security is constantly present in the family. Daily duties and responsibilities are not met. Each member of the family has a feeling the roof could fall in at any minute. You guys, when I asked earlier, and I asked you guys who here grew up in a situation where there is drugs and alcohol, many of you put up your hands. Can you remember from a very small age that you realized there's something different? My answer would probably be yes. Because it doesn't matter how old your children are, they know there's something different. So they already at that age, they live with insecurity. And I went for 3 implants, alcohol implants, where they cut on this side and they put 6 tablets, and they cut on this side and they put 6 tablets. And they said, Marius, for 6 months. 6 months, don't drink because you're going to get very sick. And I said, no problem, and I diarised the date. And I used to be a foreign exchange broker at that stage. I used to be a foreign exchange dealer at a bank, and then I became a broker. And when that 6 months was up, I went down the line to a friend of mine. And I said, hey, Foxy, my 6 months is up. And he said, let's go for lunch, Marius. And I said, fantastic. And I went for lunch. And guess what happened, guys? I slept in the office for 3 nights. Because I went for lunch, didn't go home after 12. I just went back to the office again. And I slept there. And I woke up and sat there in front of my screen early the next morning, of course. And I went for lunch that date, and the same thing happened. And when I walked out the office, I walked past my boss's, when I walked out of the dealing area, I walked past my boss's office. He said, Marius, where are you going to? I said, I'm going for another implant. He said, best you do, eh? And I didn't even think that they realized it was that bad. And this time, after 6 months, my client phoned me and he said, Marius, isn't your 6 months up by now? And I said, yeah, it is. He said, let's go for lunch, man. As true as what there's Granny Smith apples, eh? I slept in the office. Because see, there's one very important thing I never realized. And that is that this has got nothing to do with control or willpower or mindset. What this has got to do with is the first one. It doesn't matter how long I've been clean and sober for. When I picked up that first one, that was my end. And that's again what step 1 says to us, is that powerlessness. And you can ask many people that have been clean and sober for a long time and relapsed. And they'll say to you, man, if I just didn't pick up that first one. The first one, that's the problem, guys. The cardinal symptom of our disease of addiction is the inability to limit the quantity of our substance or our activity. We talk about activity, we're talking about gambling, shopping, sex, any other behavioral problem. First one is the problem. Who stopped smoking cigarettes here? And who started again? How you start? With that first drag. It's the same thing. So the insecurity starts creeping in, and things are going from bad to worse because now there's fear. Deep within each member of the family, they know that something is seriously wrong. The family knows that tragedy is just around the corner. They're scared. The family lives with the dependent person's sudden changes in mood, often with anger and violence. You know, this is one of my favorite sayings. Addicts and alcoholics don't have relationships. They only have hostages. I used to keep my family hostage with my behavior. If I arrived home in a good mood, everything would be okay. Except, I also had this, where I'd be in a good mood and open the fridge and see there's a 2 liter of milk that falls due today, and it'll be like somebody that switches a switch. And I would take that and I'd throw the milk down and say, who the hell buys milk that falls due today? And this is when I'm sober, guys, for that one day. Because you see, we become. And when we become, it doesn't change just like this. It takes time. So after the fear, we also have embarrassment. Social events are cancelled, friends are not invited into the home. I mean, how could my son invite friends home and I arrive there when I'm intoxicated and start screaming and shouting? I mean, it's just embarrassing, isn't it? How could my wife, and she did, and she would arrange a braai, and I'd be lying passed out in the bed. And the people would be like, where's Marius? And she would be like, no man, he's tired. He works hard, so he's sleeping. No, I'm passed out, man. And then despite this dance of avoidance, we just carry on doing what we want to, isn't it? Very importantly, sometimes because I can't help it. Because you know what the truth is. Before I went to rehab, I didn't know what it was about. As I've just explained to you with my 3 implants. I didn't know that it was the first one that's the problem. When I went to rehab and they said to me, Marius, you have a disease, I was relieved. Relieved to know that I'm not just a weak person. Relieved to know that there is treatment. But that's one thing, isn't it? Now what do I need to do? Once I know there's treatment, what do I need to do next? I must take responsibility for that. And you know what responsibility is? Following all the suggestions. Not picking and choosing my suggestions. Not going out here and thinking I'm different. Many of you have tried it. Many of you have been in more than one facility. When are you going to understand that doing the same thing and expecting a different result is insanity? The same thing we used to do when we used to use drugs and alcohol. We did the same thing, but we expected a different result. We went and said, tonight I'm only going to have 2. Who's ever said that? Tonight I'm not going to drink. My wife used to say to me when I had my 3rd beer, she used to be like, okay, Marius, this is your 3rd beer now. You know what happens after this. It was too late. It was the first one that was the problem. Not the 2nd or the 3rd or the 10th. So it doesn't matter how many times you say to yourself, I'm only going to have 2, I'm only going to do this. I even remember I started blaming my clothes. I used to be like, what am I going to wear? I'm not going to wear this green shirt. The last time I wore this green shirt, I got into a fight. So you know what I'd rather wear? And it's got nothing to do with the green shirt. I hope not, anyway. Isolation, communication within the family erodes. No one is willing to talk about their feelings regarding the problem, which means the family can't be a close-knit group. How can you trust each other if you're not talking to each other? How can you trust each other if you're not even speaking about your problems? Disappointment. How many times you guys that grew up like you said you did, how many times hasn't your parents promised you you're going to do something and then the next day it doesn't happen? Because they hung over, because they're not there, because they have to go to another function, for whatever reason. And again, remember what I'm saying, not only drugs and alcohol. Broken promises, unfulfilled expectations, and members of the family are constantly having their high hopes turned into great disappointments. When I ask you guys to think back about how you grew up, how many of you have done this? How many of you have promised your children or your family that you're going to do something and you don't do it? Yeah. And we're supposed to say that we live with integrity. You know what integrity is? Integrity is doing the right thing even though nobody's watching. Integrity is not picking up the piece of paper because Vanessa is walking past, or because I'm walking past. Integrity is not about leaving my cup there because somebody else will take it. Integrity is doing something even though nobody's watching. There's always suspicion, loss of trust. Members of the family learn early that the dysfunctional person can't be trusted. Conflicts and accusations are common. You know, when you get home, it's like, you've been drinking? Nope, no, I haven't been drinking. You sure? Yeah, not me. Not me. Why? What can I smell? cologne, deodorant, cologne, whatever. Smell like smoke. Where were you? Oh, you know, that guy that smoked so much. But it smells like weed, man. Yeah, he smokes weed now and again as well. This condition encourages the dysfunctional person to continue their behavior. Because how many of us hasn't? When we get home and we get confronted, we're like, what? Do you say I've been drinking? Watch, I'll show you. Hey? I'll show you. I'll show you how I'm going to drink. You just never believe me, do you? You never trust me. Why can't you trust me, man? There's reasons why people can't trust us. Okay. Resentment. Resentment is an anger we never let go of, eh? Who's got resentment here? Everybody can put up their hand. Everybody has got resentments in one or other way. Huh? Who's got a lot of resentments? Sure, okay. I wanted to do a session on resentment, and then Vanessa said, no, not this time, Marius, this group is perfect. I've got a resentment about that. So unexpressed anger towards the dysfunctional person is held within and become a raging resentment. The growing resentment may cause members of the family to react inappropriately, not only towards the dysfunctional person, but to everyone that's close to him or her. Guys, go and read page 64 of the Alcoholics Anonymous big book, where it says, resentment will be the number one offender for an alcoholic to pick up a drink again. Because that's what resentment does to us as addicts and alcoholics in recovery. You need to deal with your resentments, but imagine your family can't deal with their resentment. Because we have to walk on eggshells. So what ways do family members reduce stress? They ignore the problem behaviors. They ignore conflict. They ignore the pain they're going through. But is that okay? Is it okay to expect other people not to talk about stuff, to rather keep quiet in case they say something that triggers the dysfunctional person? Of course it's not all right. And they use defense mechanism, and they take on new roles to stabilize the family. These roles just happen, guys. It's not a conscious decision that I want to become a hero. But things has to happen in the family to change the family dynamic. Things has to happen in the family for people to look at the family and say, wow, this family is different. The first role is obviously the role of the addict or the alcoholic themselves. It's the person that suffers from the addiction. They're in denial about their addiction, and many initially avoid seeking treatment. You see, I'm going to say most addicts and alcoholics will only come to treatment once something happens. Okay. But something has to happen for an addict or an alcoholic to make that decision of, okay, I need help. Otherwise, why must I stop? If nothing's happened in my life, why must I stop? Eh? Why, if I can carry on drinking or using and there's no problem, then why must I stop? There's no reason for me to stop. And then a lot of people have to go through harsher consequences. And I always say, the sooner rather than later to come to a facility. But I also want to say another thing to you guys. The reason why somebody comes to treatment will not determine your outcome. Makes sense what I'm saying? Must I say that again? The reason you're coming to treatment will not determine your outcome. In other words, if you are forced in here, you don't want to be here, you've got just as a good of chance as somebody that wants to be here. But hopefully then, when you're here, work the program. Be honest, open-minded, and willing. Because maybe somebody in this group says something that turns you around. Maybe one of the facilitators says something that changes that. And as they say, the penny drops. But there is no consequence big enough for an addict or an alcoholic to stop using drugs and alcohol. Okay, no consequence big enough, except death. A consequence will bring you to a treatment center, but it's not going to keep you clean and sober. Trust me, I've seen it. We've got examples here of people that's been in ICU. They'll go out and carry on drinking. You would think, yes, man. There's people that's been in prison and they come out and they carry on using. My wife divorced me. We were married for 19 years. She divorced me with a restraining order. I carried on drinking and using. There's no consequence big enough. And remember, when people talk about rock bottom's got a basement. And some people will go in there and they'll find another level. And another one, and another one. Don't believe me? Go try it. I've often wondered, this is probably one of the industries with the most returning customer base. And you know what's scary about that? Is that some people will not get the opportunity to return because they die. Okay. Then somebody in the family will become the family hero. The family hero is that person that tries to put a positive spin on things. They're an overachiever, a perfectionist. They try and create normalcy in chaos. But their real feelings while doing all this is anxiety. They have feelings of inadequacy, unworthiness, resentfulness, self-blame, loneliness. If this is a child that grows up in this dysfunctional family, as an adult, they'll have an unrealistic sense of control. They'll need to control. They'll need approval. They'll feel overly responsible and even act irresponsible when overwhelmed. They offer the family a sense of being okay. So if anybody else looks at that family, it's like, that family, yes. You know that Dirk, he's a great okay. You know, first team, captain, rugby, chess captain. He aced it. All A's, man. So fantastic. So from the outside, this family looks okay. The family hero created that, but without saying, geez, I better do something to make my family look good. This is what this person created for themselves, and it makes the family look okay. So if you grew up, like I said, and you have siblings, can any of you relate that one of your siblings became or you even, became the family hero? Who would say they became a family hero? Misha. And then the next one we get is the family scapegoat. The family scapegoat will take the blame for all the problems. They will always be blamed instead of the addict themselves. They struggle with feelings of guilt. Their own feelings while they're doing this is feelings of anger, confusement, resentment, inadequacy, self-blame for the family problems. They're completely out of control. As an adult, they might have progressive substance abuse problems. They'll have normal life problems throughout their life, and they could have a progressive involvement with the criminal justice system. What they offer the family is a sense of purpose by providing someone to blame. So when the family gets together, it's like, you know, big problem with that. When I said I can relate to this, my older brother became the hero. The family hero. He opened a business here in South Africa, and then it was very successful, and he opened it up in the UK and then Australia and Dubai, and he now lives in Australia. He was the hero, man. Dirk, yes, fantastic, man. Look how well that family is. My middle brother was the scapegoat. He was one of those we would sit and say, you know that Arnold made another girl pregnant. Yeah? And then the next thing I hear that he's in jail because of a fight he had. Or there was a car accident and he ran away. He eventually left South Africa and he went to the UK. And he changed his name because he couldn't come back here. I didn't even know what his name was anymore. Mr. Smith, I don't know. Didn't speak to him anymore. He eventually died from alcohol. They only found him 2 days later in his flat. I only found out a while after that because eventually somebody could get hold of me. So he became the scapegoat. And then we have the joker, the mascot of the family. Always tries to keep things happy, works as a distraction from the addict. They're an approval seeker, but very fragile underneath. Their real feelings are anxiety. They measure self-worth by how others see them. They have feelings of anger, hurt, loneliness. As an adult, they have problems in school or at work, and they seldom form intimate relationships. They clown around, they're the life of the party, and they may develop substance abuse problem. What they offer the family is a sense of comic relief. Now, humor is one of the best characteristics anybody can have if it's used appropriately. Once you use humor inappropriately, it takes away from other people. Has anybody got a friend that makes a joke of everything? And you're trying to be serious with this person and they just like deflect with humor because they hate to feel uncomfortable. So they'll just deflect instead of wanting to share with whatever you're sharing. I became the mascot at school, but the mascot offers the family a sense of comic relief from the pain. So that was us. We had my brother, he was the hero, my middle brother the scapegoat, and I was the joker. You also get the lost child. The lost child is an invisible family member who avoids conflict. The lost child avoids all talk about the problem. All talk about the problem. They try not to draw attention or cause trouble. Their real feelings are loneliness, fear, unworthiness, inadequacy, lack of fulfillment. As an adult, they may have problems with depression, difficulty with interpersonal relationship, lack of coping mechanisms. They won't have coping mechanisms because they withdrew themselves. And they just sat with themselves. So the lost child is like, sure, where's Gertjie? You know, what a great child. Gertjie is probably in his room studying. Meanwhile, Gertjie is sitting in the room hating the family. Hating to be out there. That's why Gertjie is in his room. Anybody a lost child? Was anybody a lost child? You found now. Then you get the enabler. Okay. What normally happens, guys, and it's not always like this, but if one of the parents are an addict or an alcoholic, or let me change that. If one of the parents have a dysfunction, the other person would be the enabler. Okay. But it's not always like that. One of the children can also be an enabler. I've heard many times that one of the children enable the parent. Okay. Or they enable the other sibling. So enablers aren't bad people. I do a whole session on enabling for your families. So what I do is once a month, I do slideshows like these for your family. And then afterwards we sit in a circle, and every month it's a different topic. Okay. Just so that your family can also understand what happens and where it comes from. So it's important for enablers to know that they're not bad people. Because a lot of enablers think they're bad people. It's not that. But you need to take responsibility that I'm an enabler so that I can change it. An enabler is a people pleaser, smooths over conflict, makes excuses. They shelter and shield the family members. They may even lie to protect the person. Oh, sorry, and George can't come to work today because he's got a stomach ache. Nonsense, man. Lying with a hangover in bed, man. Rather say that. My ex-wife used to enable me for years. And then one morning, shock. I arrived at 4 o'clock and I had a bosparade at work. And I went and I lay in the bath and I fell asleep. And she left me there. When I woke up, the water was ice cold. And when I looked at my watch, it was too late to go for the bosparade. I was very angry that she didn't wake me up. Can you believe it, eh? But I lost my job. It was the first time she didn't enable me and I lost my job. And she didn't do it after that again because you know why? Because then financially we implicated. Can you see why people also enable, eh? As a protection for themselves and the rest of the family. So they're a bit in a catch-22. The real feelings of an enabler is feelings of anger, hurt, guilt, resentment, anxiety, fear. They're desperate to control everything. They feel helpless, exhausted. They offer the family a sense of stability and protection, isn't it? Eh? So these are the roles, and I hope that some of you can relate to these roles that either you became, or even look at your own family now after what you have put them through. Has any of your children become a hero? Definitely, eh? Has any of your children become a lost child? I mean, you can have more than one role as well, eh? Like a lot of heroes eventually start feeling, why the hell must I do all this, Ben? No, I'm not going to do all this. And they become a scapegoat. All of a sudden they're wearing an earring and walking like a gangster at school. Yeah. Because why must they put all that pressure on themselves? So how can the families help? No, this is a big thing, guys. Just remember one thing. Your family doesn't have to understand addiction. Okay. Why must they? Because you got a problem. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I can't believe my family is not even supporting me. What are you talking about? Look what you put them through, man. Okay. But if they do support you, fantastic. And it's going to make your journey easier. But you can't force them. You can't force anybody to do something. Some families are just so gutful, man. Some families are just so tired. But it'll be great if the family does understand what the person is going through, understand the wide-ranging effects on all family members, understand each family member's role. If the family understands that, it becomes easier for everybody, including the person in recovery, but they don't have to, and always remember that. Eh? Make change happens if parents, loved ones, and friends recognize that there's an illness. They must know that it's a family illness. I encourage all family members to go for help. Okay, they must go see their own psychologist, not your psychologist. They must go to, and I'll show you later, they must go to Al-Anon and Nar-Anon because they're sick. You see, we make our family sick. And then we come in here and we get all the support here, isn't it? And we get all the tools, eh? And then we go home and we expect everything to be okay. It can't be okay, man. You made them sick. If they want to support you, they should go for their own help as well. If they don't want to, why must they? Families have choices and can break the unhealthy norms. If I was in a role, I can break that. Doesn't matter what role was developed, I don't have to stay in that role. How do we start becoming better? We practice honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I cannot stress honesty more. Guys, if you cannot become honest with yourself, you're not going to become honest with anybody else. If you are not honest, you ain't going nowhere in life. You can come into this facility and you can give everybody your lip service. And you can leave here and it's to your own detriment. Whatever you do here and you think you're fooling us, you're only fooling yourself. You're not fooling me. You need to become honest. Otherwise, I'm telling you, you ain't going nowhere in life in general. Positive support, structure, clear boundaries, healthy boundaries, stay active, Look for signs of progress, not perfection. Get professional help. In other words, be better today than what I was yesterday. That's progress, not perfection. We can't be perfect. Most of us. And then some tools and support, psychiatrists, psychologists, okay? Psychiatric and behavioral clinics, friends, relatives, school counselors, religious leaders. There's at Al-Anon, Al-Teen, Codependency Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, books, internet, guys. Internet, we've got Google these days. When I drank and used, there wasn't even Google, man. Yeah. Eventually there was, I think, but I can't remember. And work the 12-step program. Right. Are there any questions? Or answers, it says. Q&A. Are there any questions or answers? Now, I hope you get a better understanding of how we affect people around us. They say one alcoholic affects 36 people around them. Indirectly and directly. I affected my wife, who went to work. She couldn't do her work properly. It affects her colleagues. It affects her family, her mother and father. That affects them, and it's like a whole ripple effect. Okay. Yes.
What eventually made you go to rehab?
Eventually what happened was that, so it was after my wife divorced me with a restraining order. I was very angry with her. I mean, how dare she, isn't it? Nogal with a restraining order. I mean, can't, you know. And I went and I lived in a cottage, and I never went back to my business, my broking business. I only went in there. It was absolutely bizarre, but I only went in there on public holidays and weekends. I don't know why. It was just one of those things. And then the one Friday night I went out, and I got thrown out of a restaurant. And then I went to another restaurant, and my ex-wife had to go sort everything out there because I broke the restaurant a bit, and the cops arrived there and they asked me to leave. They didn't arrest me. I still don't know why. Got into my 4x4, and I went and checked into I was actually thrown out of the cottage by this stage. So I was living in my 4x4. I was just driving around in my 4x4 and making cock. That's what I did, actually. And then I went and I checked into a Formula One. Can you, the older people remember Formula One?
It's Sun 1 now.
It's the Sun now, yeah?
Sun 1. Now it's
Is it Sun 1?
Yeah.
It's Sun 1 now. And I checked into the Formula One. I always had my dealer with me, because by this time I was smoking crack. Yeah. That's why she divorced me with a restraining order. So I checked into the Formula One and I smoked crack there all night. And there was another altercation in the reception area where I got into a fight. And Saturday morning, it was about 7 o'clock. And for the first time, I was scared. You know, I had a business partner who's unfortunately passed away today. And they asked him one day to sum me up with one word, and he said, fearless. People know me. People know how I was. I was aggressive. I was one of those guys that you hear about that could still throw a punch even though I was drunk. So it was always chaos around me. And that morning, I got into my 4x4 and I drove, and I was very scared. That it was fear. It was absolute fear. And as I was driving, I went to this one girl in Cyrildene that I used to smoke crack with. And she was in a block of flats. And I stopped there and I rang the bell. And she didn't come down. So I thought, oh, well. I got back into my 4x4. I drove all the way to the West Rand to another girl that I was also smoking with. And I could hear her tell the maid. I could hear her tell the lady that works for her, tell him I'm not here. So I thought, okay, I'm not welcome, yeah. Got in, and now the fear just became more and more and more. And I drove to another friend's house. He used to work for a bank. So he didn't use drugs, but he drank. So I stopped there, and the lady that works for them also came out. And she said, no, they're gone for the weekend. And I'm like, okay. Yes, and I was now got into my Hilux, because it's not a bakkie, it's a Hilux. And I drove, and I went to my sister's place. They weren't there. Then I realized, it was my nephew's birthday. But now it was like, you know what? Actually, you know what I thought by myself at that stage? I thought by myself, I need to leave Joburg. Because I was really scared. I'd made a lot of enemies along the way. So I was really scared. So I stopped at a garage. It was an engine garage. And I stopped there. I didn't have any change on me, but there was a call box there. For you younger people, how this works is you put money in. and then you can dial. But I didn't have money, eh? But you could make a return call. So I took the phone, 0020, I think is the number. And I said, please phone. And I phoned my ex-wife. And the lady came back and said, look, either there's something wrong with the phone, or they're not picking up. So I said, well, can you make a return call? This was in 2003. Can you make a return call to a cell phone? Cell phones had just come out. She said, no, we can't do that. My ex-wife used to work from home. So she had an office there. But she was very disciplined. So her discipline was she won't go into the office on weekends. But even if she does go into the office and the phone rings, she won't answer it. And I said to the lady, I said, do me a favor. Here's the number. Phone this number, please. This is a number for the office of my ex-wife. And I still say this was, you know, we're all sitting here and we're all miracles, eh? Okay. Because we're still alive. But this was my spiritual moment, is when I did that. She said, okay, and she phoned. And my ex-wife was in the office. And the phone rang, and she decided to pick up the phone, which she normally doesn't do. And I said, hello. And she said, yeah. She said, yeah, what do you want? I said, I want half the house back. No, I'm joking. I said, I said, I need help. And she said, where are you? And I said to her where I was. She said, okay, I'll come there. She put down the phone. And typical me, I felt better. Because you know why I felt better? Because I took all my problems again and just shoved it onto somebody else's lap, isn't it, eh? Somebody else is going to sort this out now for me. She's going to sort it out now for me. And I went back to my 4x4 and it had a clip on sale, and I opened the sale and everything was there, man. My clothes and my Omo and surf was lying all over the back there. I even grabbed some. And on my half-fried meat, everything was there. But there was a six-pack there. And I cracked the beer. Stood there now feeling much better again, because she's going to sort out my problem for me. And I stood there and I drank there, and she drove around and she came in. As she came in, I'll never forget the look on her face. And she stopped next to me and she wound down the window and she said, Marius, I thought you said you need help. And this was on the 24th of May 2003. And I looked at this half a beer, I can't remember how much was in there. And I took this, and I chucked it away, and I said to her, you know, you're right. And that day I checked into rehab. And I haven't had any mood and mind altering substance from that day. And I count my clean day on the 25th of May 2003. Thank you. Sorry?
Which rehab did you go to?
I went to a rehab. Not allowed to mention other rehabs here. I went to rehab for 4.5 months because I realized, actually I didn't realize anything. The primary program there is 6 weeks. So I went my 6 weeks and I didn't have a choice. It was like, Marius, you're going from here to secondary. You know why I did that, guys? Because when we leave here, there's 2 things that happen. The first thing is, I'm going to pick up. The next thing is not as simple as I'm not going to pick up. If it was that simple, only people that make a choice will relapse, isn't it, eh? And I'm hoping people that relapse don't make that choice. But our brain changes structurally and functionally when we use drugs and alcohol. And I'll explain all that to you guys one day as well. But I'm going to pick up. Your other choice is, I'm going to do whatever it takes not to pick up. Doing whatever it takes not to pick up is following all the suggestions. Not picking and choosing my suggestions. Not picking and choosing whether I'm going to go to a meeting tonight or not. Not picking and choosing whether I'm going to get a sponsor or not. Not picking and choosing whether I'm not going to see any more of my using friends. But doing whatever it takes not to pick up. My doing whatever it takes is different than yours. Because as much money as what I used to make in that industry that I was in, and there was a lot of money in that industry, they said to me, you know what our suggestion is, Marius, is that you don't go back to that industry, eh? And I didn't, eh? I didn't. It was a hard decision. And do you guys know that you can even go look on my Facebook page, I don't have one friend, well, now I have, that I've known in all those years. So I reinvented myself completely when I left my secondary facility. I went for 4.5 months, I went to rehab. Because you know why? Because they made a suggestion that the longer you stay in a facility, the better your chances are. When I got out there, I started doing service. I drove from Northcliffe to Houghton to pick up people and to take them to Kensington to an AA meeting. And then the next one, I'll drive from there to another meeting. And I did this for 18 months. Until the one day they said to me, Marius, please, you need to give somebody else a chance now. You're being a bit selfish now with your service. So I said, okay, you're right, I will. Because service is suggested. So even the divorce didn't say, oh shit, I better go to rehab. My son didn't speak to me for 8 years. Today he does. While I was in recovery, for 8 years while I was in recovery, he didn't speak to me. Now, if I stand here and I make suggestions, I know how difficult they are. Because I've been there and I've done it. You don't have to. But one thing I can tell you is it works for me. It works for many other people as well. Again, it's up to you. Or do you want to see that look in your family's face? That's a choice you must make. Have an absolutely lovely lunch, guys. Bye-bye.